meeting. I think just to say thank you to Leah for organising last night. I thought it worked really well, and it's always more difficult to source these places when it's not your hometown. So well done on that, and thank you very much for a very good event. I think most of us were there, and it was a very nice, relaxed evening. I think, on that, it is probably a good point just to actually, record our thanks, I think, for all the hard work that you've put into organising this meeting. It is difficult when you're doing it overseas, you haven't been to the venue and all that kind of thing. So I think, without wanting to jinx today, I think it's worked amazingly well, amazingly smoothly, particularly given it's our first really full board meeting for almost 3 years. So well done on that. Thank you. I think a round of applause. I think it's also right to record our thanks to the staff here, particularly on the audiovisual side. That I was amazed yesterday afternoon, actually, when we had the academic session, yesterday morning. We had questions going backwards and forwards between Ajit in Sri Lanka and, the researcher in Malaysia. I just thought, and we could all hear that. I thought that was just a tribute to how everything was working really well. So thank you very much to that, and thank you to staff at the venue for being flexible in terms of when I've forgotten that we needed to break for a coffee break, or we've ended up moving at short notice. It's always more difficult when it's an external venue rather than as we've had IFAX headquarters. So Leah, if you can convey our thanks to the hotel for all the support and the excellent food and so on. It really has been a really good meeting from that point of view. Ross, to you.
Yes, and just one quick announcement on the agenda for today. So we're starting with the program and technical director's report. We're working through that. At the end of that, we'll have a few final announcements, and then we'll be closing the public meeting and we'll be moving into the sustainability discussion. The room today, we only have till noon. So when you leave, make sure you take your electronic plugins and papers and things today, because they will be coming in and cleaning the room after we depart. And just if you do want to use the room after the meeting closes, that's okay. You can plan to work here or you can work in your room, but you will have to be out by noon because they're going to get it ready for another event.
Okay, good. Well, so in terms of the agenda for this morning, obviously the first session that we need to have is around, what the work program now looks like. So without further ado, pass over to you, Ross.
Thanks a lot, Ian. So I thought maybe we just start, and I wanted to share some personal meeting reflections and some thoughts as we're starting to move back to these in-person meetings and hybrid meetings. The agenda has been a little bit different. We're getting used to being together again, and just a couple of points have been bubbling up in my head. And firstly, I'm impressed by the strong progress that we've made. There've been some tough discussions, but I think we're making progress on the tough issues and focusing on the right things. I personally think that the meetings is making a big difference and having people here to be able to speak. And the second point on the agenda is the one I really wanted to touch on. And I really think the space in the agenda for collaborative time has made a real difference on projects. From a staff perspective, it's really helpful when we get the board feedback, but even more helpful when we have a chance to talk through some of the comments and the richness of the thinking and how it flows into drafting immediately after a session. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to members, TAs, other observers who've been here this week and made their time available in the collaborative time and contributed with staff on discussions. I think it's been excellent collaboration, and I know from a staff perspective, it's really helping us on the projects. And I know everybody's busy, and time is a scarce resource for everybody, and we really do appreciate the effort that people have made this week to really utilize that staff collaboration time. So with that, it just a true thanks to members, TAs, as well as staff for really taking advantage of it, using the time that was available. And I think we'll see the benefits when we have our discussions in October and December.
Thanks, Ross. I don't know whether anybody else has any sort of observations on what Ross has said particularly. I think obviously it is the first time that we've actually specifically put that collaboration time into the agenda, and in many respects actually that's replaced some of what used to happen, you know, kind of outside the meeting time into the evening, overnight, and all that kind of thing. And, you know, perhaps strikes a better balance in terms of effective use of the meeting time that we developed over the pandemic, and actually then specifically acknowledging that we do need that sort of small group session time and time for task forces outside. So, you know, if anybody has any sort of other observations, you know, happy to get them either now or sort of, you know, informally. But it would be good to get your feedback on that and whether we carry that on for future.
Great. So with that, I thought it might be important that we have a little bit of time today to discuss the October check-in meeting and the items that we might want to use to bring back on that at that time. As you remember, the October check-ins, or all the check-ins, we have a 3-hour time limit, so we don't have ample time. But I did think there were a couple items in particular that we could prioritize some of that time with. I thought the conceptual framework, limited scope update, measurement for the project would be a good opportunity to review the drafting changes and decisions coming out of this meeting, including the replacement cost and value and use discussions, just to kind of get that tightened up and ready. I also thought it would be useful to measurement and ED 78, the September 2022 key decisions and drafting changes, but mainly the COV drafting principles and implications, just so the board can really start to see what it looks like from the graphic that we showed yesterday and how that will eventuate in the actual wording. As we know, the devil's in the details. So those are my two main proposals. I do know there's one other item that I'll probably see a flag on that we'll have a bit of a discussion on, but I'm happy to have that as well. But I think probably at least an hour each on the agenda for those two items, maybe a little bit more on measurement ED 78. But those are my initial thoughts on using that time to the best benefit in October.
Thanks, Ross. And just to say, in terms of the measurement side of things, the idea, given it's quite a short period of time between now and the October check-in, would be that staff would work on the drafting, implementing those changes to get the board's initial feedback, and then the drafting group would come into play after that, probably meeting on a couple of occasions between the October check-in and December to really work through what the board's actually decided and the comments, the further comments from the board, seeing that those initial drafting proposals coming out of this meeting. And then we'll see where we get to, whether we have other issues that need fixing, or, you know, how basically, but that at least allows us to sort of crystallize the issues at that stage. Okay. Lynn, go ahead. I was waiting for your flag actually, which is why I was sort of wittering a bit, but anyway, go ahead.
Sorry, I hadn't realized you were inviting us to comment. So yeah,
no, this is, sorry, just to be very clear with the board, this is, you know, please put in thoughts at this stage, because the idea is, you know, this is just sort of literally Ross's initial thoughts. He'd passed, you know, given me a quick look and I made a few suggestions, but this is very much up to the board in terms of as we design the agendas for both October and December, and then what does that mean going forward? Sorry, Lynn, I'll let you.
No, it's fine. We would like, from a leases perspective, to have a bit of time at October check-in to discuss the initial measurement element of the paper that we didn't discuss at this meeting. If we could get agreement on initial measurement and terminology in particular, it would help the task force move forward in terms of drafting. So we would like to bring that to the October check-in. We won't talk about subsequent measurement, which we need to assess it when COV is finalized, but the initial measurement element from the paper, I think we would like to discuss at October, please.
Thanks, Lynn. Everybody okay with that? Good. Okay. Well, I think you're right. I think that would help you move, the task force move that forward. So I think that's a good suggestion. Any other immediate thoughts on the check-in agenda? Okay, well, let's sort of move then through into sort of thinking about December and so on, and then we can circle back if we need to.
Thanks, Ian. So, the big challenge we're managing at the moment on the work program is what I like to call the approval bottleneck that we're staring down with revenue, transfer expenses, measurement, ED78, conceptual framework changes. And we only have 4 days of agenda time possible for December because we have the CAG that week. So no possibility to extend the days as we did this week. So my initial proposal is one, we haven't picked up the responses yet for retirement benefit plans. So we haven't got back into that project. I think it's not going to be critical to pick that up in December. So I would first put forward a proposal that we defer that first discussion till March 2023 to free up some space. And then the second proposal is on other lease type arrangements. Now, not ruling out that we might be able to still approve in December, but I think in terms of finalization, we should make it early 2023. And then once we see how much agenda time we have when we have the other items diarized and the progress coming out of the check-in on leases, can make a final call on whether there's an opportunity to consider approval or not. So those are the two main changes that I'm proposing at this time to the work program to reflect. Again, on the coming approvals themselves, my personal view is we should still be working with an aim to approve. The discussion should focus on the substantive issues we have left. Do our best to avoid reopening decisions we've already made and focus on the ones we still have to make. That being said, I do think, in line with Ian's point yesterday, if we find we need more time in December, we should take it. But I don't want to update the work program until after the October check-in, where we see where we get on the drafting on COV and other items. So that's kind of my initial point, proposal. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Ian, to hear comments on that.
Thanks very much, Ross. And I mean, just on the line, I think on the other lease type arrangements, one of the things there is the proposed amendments to authoritative text are actually quite limited. And so we can perhaps be a bit more creative in terms of if the board does get input into the range of different material, the sort of new IGs that were requested, the BCs and the feedback statement, it may be that we don't have to deal with that either that can be delegated to the task force or it could come back for the sort of February check-in or whatever. So I think there's a number of sort of flexible ways through on that. But again, it's really to kind of try and make sure that we're not, despite the number of projects that we're trying to move towards finalization, that we just allow some sort of pressure valves, if you like, for the board, but open up for comments, thoughts, reflections on what Ross has proposed. Yeah, Todd, kick us off.
Thanks, Ian. I think in my mind, measurement is an absolute critical project because it links to a number of other of the projects there. And I like the fact that we're trying to be quite ambitious to get these things through, but I suppose the concern I have is that there is a bit more drafting to go in that measurement space. And as we've seen with even ED 78 for this meeting, sometimes you just need that chance to reflect and make sure that it all hangs together. So I probably at this point have a concern about getting there on measurement and final approval of that for December, because of that need to just reflect and make sure that that really is going to do what it needs to, and the connections to these other things. So good to have the ambition, but I think realistically, I think it might be early in 2023. That's just my personal reflections.
Thanks, Todd. Other thoughts? I mean, I think, you know, Todd, you've articulated what I sense is, you know, the thinking around the board table. I think it chimes in with where Ross and I are, and you know, in many respects, I think that's where, as Ross has proposed, we do need to check in. You know, we do need to take stock after the October check-in, because clearly the board does need to see the drafting coming through after the discussions we've had this week. I think we've taken some major decisions, and we need to see that work through. We probably also need a first go at the definition as well. And then, you know, the idea will be that goes into the drafting group to make sure that we've, you know, that the board's you know, comments are reflected. And I think if we hit other issues through that, either that process in October or in December, then, you know, you're absolutely right, we'll need to you know, reconsider how we handle that during the first part of 2023. I think, you know, that's where the request to board members for any other points on other areas of measurement, given the number of times, you know, the fact that ED has been out twice already, that will be really helpful if members can pass any further comments to staff, you know, as soon as they can. Because again, if there are issues that need to come back to the board, we want to try and surface those early, given the centrality of this to the various other different projects. And it is that, I think it's that interlocking thing that we've got with pretty much every single project at the moment. It's how does it sit, which is the real challenge for us at the moment. So I think your point is well made. So thanks for that. Renee.
Yes, thank you. An area of the project that is not clear for me, and I don't know where it fits on our radar at the moment. We haven't really mentioned it in the latest discussion, is the consequential amendments to other standards as a result of the measurement standard. Where does it fit here in this timeline? Does it fit? Is there capacity in this timeline to look at that? Personally, what would make me feel comfortable is some sort of an analysis that we step back and we say, okay, where are we at now in this late stage of the project, and inventorying all of the areas, all of the standards where this is coming in, and then maybe stepping back and deciding what do we do, like so some sort of a decision tool, right? Not necessarily to achieve all of these consequential amendments if they become high volume, but at least recognize that there may be future work to do at a future point, and then have a conversation and at least feel comfortable that we've considered the impacts on the other standards. Thank you.
So what I asked, because I think you're exactly right in that needing to sort of see how it all comes together, I asked staff if they do the equivalent of the chart that was done for, or the charts that were done for revenue and transfer expenses. So this is the sort of first cut done during the meeting. So there are some rough edges, but you know, it seemed useful to just be able to step the board through that. So over to staff on that.
So up to the September meeting, we've been working on the core text and application guidance. And I'd say for the most part, that's largely done for everything outside of current operational value. For the rest of the year, as Ian mentioned, we'll really focus on current operational value and get that up to spec so that it's ready for the board to look at in December, working with a drafting group there as well. From September to, oh, sorry, and this is where the drafting group comes in. Sorry, as Ian mentioned, this is the first time we're really using this slide, so I don't know exactly all the animations. Maybe I'll pull it all up and I can talk through it. For basis for conclusions, implementation guidance, and amendments to other IPSAS. These will all be focused on in September to December as well. Renee, specifically to your point on amendments to other IPSAS, I always think this is a heavy lift, but we did do a really massive lift in developing the ED, so we have a good basis to go on. It doesn't mean we don't need to revisit it, but we're not starting from scratch. So I can't remember who I was talking to on staff, but I always said, don't underestimate how hard the amendments to other IPSAS is, but we're not starting from zero here.
So at least that, that's the overview of what, what the situation is, but I thought it was useful to put that alongside, what you saw earlier on in the week in terms of revenue and transfer expenses. And I think, being honest about it, what it shows, going back to Ross's point about bottleneck, is actually that, clearly with measurement, we've got the outworking of the decisions on COV and whether we hit further issues there. With all of the projects, though, it's really in that area around basis for conclusions and then the non-authoritative implementation guidance, as well as the amendments to other IPSAS, and working it all through. And it's those latter areas which are common, when you think about what we showed on the other projects, and let's have a talk about measurement, but it might be worthwhile just putting up the revenue transfer expenses equivalents if we can.
So this is the same graph that you saw on Monday, revenue timeline. I'm not going to walk through it in detail, but we've done this for all the projects where we've got bottlenecks and how we're planning to get there and get us ready for approval. I think the key concern, as Todd's noted at the moment, for me on the staff side, is more on measurement and how far we need to go. I'm less concerned on revenue and transfer expenses. There's a lot to do in volume, but I think we've bottomed the big issues and had really good engagement and feedback for staff to take forward with the drafting group through to December. So just put the transfer expenses up as well. So from a staff perspective, across these three projects, we'll be working off of these timelines and we'll continue to update them based on progress. If we do get an indication that we're falling behind or we're not making progress where we need to, as I said a couple slides back, I think we're at the critical point where if the board needs more time, it needs to take it. Better to take an extra quarter if needed than to push something through. And I think that's particularly important in my view on transfer expenses, because it is highly likely that one will need re-exposure, as might revenue, but it's quite a new model and we want to make sure that what we put out there is well thought out so that we're not in a position to have to rethink it again in terms of the model, but I think we're getting there.
So, if you like, that's sort of showing what's behind there. So, yeah, comments, reflections, Lynn first and then Abdullah.
Sorry, just a point of clarification on the measurement project. You didn't have a row on the equivalent graph around illustrative examples, and I couldn't remember where we got to on that and if that was a activity or not that you were expecting in this last quarter.
So we've struggled with this for a long time, Lynn, with developing illustrative examples, because we don't know exactly where they sit. If you want illustrative examples for heritage assets, they should probably sit in PP&E. So that's why there's not a row on illustrative examples specifically in measurement. It doesn't mean we don't need anything, but we don't know exactly where they sit yet. And so that's why there isn't a row.
Thanks, then. Abdullah.
I don't know. Thanks, Chair. I don't know where to start in this, but I'm very passionate about the measurement because it's greatly affecting the progress of our project or implementation project and too many other projects, and they are undergoing. And every time we delay this or we delay any of the IPSAS standards, there is always a question mark. I'm telling you from working on the ground. I always get questions on like, it's taking you too much to approve any standards. So it's like, sometimes it's affecting the conversion process itself. And sometimes it's like, even the perceptions from other stakeholders. And that is from one perspective. Second, in measurement specifically, I've been busy day in, day out the last 1.5 years on it. And COP been very instrumental for us and helped us a lot. If we are, I'm afraid, if we delay anything beyond December, it's going to be affecting our conversion process, and our conversion process is affecting, like being looked at from too many countries in the region and even beyond the region. So I don't know if we are here in the board trying to solve out for everything. Some of the issues might be for the valuer, and we are getting into that game, which is, I guess it's like, if we leave it to the valuers and we leave it for the entities to take that with the valuer, sometimes it's going to touch part of the transparency issue. But guess what? It's like the conversion process is a baby step process, but you don't put a heavy lift from the initiation of the conversion. We put a lots of weight on the subsequent measurement, but the initial even measurement, if we want to get countries to be onboarded on IPSAS and to be onboarded in Acroval, and that by itself is promoting the transparency. So I'm sharing this with you because I'm very supporter for COP, because I've seen that in practice, and we didn't do it for a small number of assets. We did it for a huge number of assets, and it's everything that was presented in the literature that was shared with us here on the board. There might be some issues that we need to articulate on some of the papers, but other than that, it has been in the practice, been tested, and I don't mind if we want to conduct a workshop and show you what have been done there and how it has been very instrumental for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Abdullah. I think that captures exactly the kind of tension between these long-running projects and wanting to get the guidance right. And actually, as you say, there are expectations out there, and I know it's not just in Saudi Arabia. I know other countries are waiting for us to complete these projects, and I think that's, you know, it's trying to balance that at the moment, which I think is what we're trying to do, that we need to keep moving forward, but equally where we hit issues that come out, as Ross has said, we need to take the time to make sure, you know, because although a quarter delay at this stage would be difficult, and recognize that, but equally we hope these standards are going to be there for some time. And as Thomas said yesterday, particularly measurement is a really fundamental. So I think that's really why it felt right to sort of put this out there for the board, in terms of that we're all clear about the challenges we're facing, and that we need to keep checking progress, and if we can, we'll get there, but if we can't and there are issues that emerge, then we need to respond to that and make sure that we deliver the best product we can. Thomas.
And just to shortly build on what Abdullah just said, probably I think the challenge is to kind of find the delineation between questions the standards that it has to solve and questions the preparers, implementers, evaluators have to solve then in bringing that to life. And I think the danger is that kind of the board thinks ahead and thinks about problems, which are actually problems of implementers and in the field. You can't kind of think through every single issue which might happen or problem which might occur. At some point you have to stop, bring it in the field, and then it's their task to solve it. And I think it's very encouraging to hear it can be solved and it can be applied.
Thanks, Thomas. Any other thoughts from board members? Okay, so I mean, I take it everybody's in agreement that we do move back the initial analysis of comments then on the retirement benefits to the start of next year. And you know, I think we've had some good discussions, and you know, points like the point Renee made on making sure we deal with the consequentials adequately and so on. Anything else we should? Abdullah, are you still in? Or okay, thank you.
So nothing more from me on that. Just thanks to members for the thoughts and the feedback. And again, we'll make sure to have some time on the agenda in October for another check-in on timelines as well. We don't normally do that at the check-ins, but I think it is critical that we had a little bit of time for that at the end of that meeting, just to reflect and you know, see if we're still online with these timelines, and you know, if we can still, you know, make an honest effort for approval in December or not.
Okay, so I think with that, we're through in terms of the discussion on the work program, and so that brings me to the final item of the week, which as ever is the fact that December marks the point where we have to say farewell to some board members and to welcome other new members with effect from the 1st of January. And in terms of the decisions that were approved by IFAC board last week, where we get to is there are 3 reappointments for next year of members coming towards the end of their first term. So I'm very pleased that the reappointments have been approved for Camira, for Patricia, and also for Scott. So well done. And we look forward to continuing to work with you for the next 3 years. And it's always, you know, I think it was interesting talking over drinks last night about the sort of feeling that IPSASB, you know, it does feel like a big family, and I think it genuinely does. Actually, it's one of the great things about being involved with the board, is that sort of extended network of contacts that you build, and that sort of, you know, generally that you get to know people, and that's one of the pleasures around the you know, having the physical board meeting. And therefore it's always bittersweet in terms of the December meeting that we have to say farewell to board members, or maybe au revoir is a better way of putting it. But in terms of those completing their terms and leaving the board at the end of December, there are 3 board members leaving. So Ajith will be finishing at the end of December, Chris will be, and Lindy will be. So that leaves 3 spots for new board members, and I'm happy to say that 2 of them are with us in the room today, which is great. So Andrew van der Burg will be joining the board, and then Noyati Ahmad from Malaysia, who's led the implementation in Malaysia. So really pleased to have colleagues from Malaysia back on the board. So welcome and well done. And then we will also have a 3rd new member, Jenna Wala from Kenya, joining the board as well, who also has practical implementation and standard setting experience to bring to our deliberations. So really pleased that we will be welcoming those 3 members at the beginning of January. And then that leaves one further announcement, which is obviously, you know, Lindy is not just a board member, but also the deputy chair So we will need a new deputy chair for next year, and that will be Scott. So congratulations, Scott. Well done. So I think those are the announcements, and you know, really pleased that you know, we can welcome those new colleagues, and that will help us move forward, I think. And that probably, without getting ahead of the forum, I think chimes in with the, you know, the increasing implementation experience that we have around the board, I think is becoming increasingly important. So thank you, everyone. With that, Ross, anything else that we need to cover off?
No, just a reminder that we'll be closing the live stream, and we'll be moving into the sustainability discussion, which will be a board only session. Okay, so thanks everyone to both board members, technical advisors, observers, and you know, great to have a public gallery again with us. I think it has been a really important meeting. We've made, you know, some really good progress on projects. You know, as Ross said, you know, there have been times when it's been tricky, the discussions we've had, but I think they have been really constructive, and I think everybody's entered into them in a really constructive debate, constructive manner. Certainly the outer provision for outer session time has been really, appears to have worked. So we'll look at how we work with that in December and going forwards. But thanks everyone, and particularly thanks to those that have really struggled in terms of getting visas and so on. I think the evidence of the discussions just bears out how important, you know, having the majority of board members here is, and it's really helped our discussions. Ross. Sorry, one quick update as well on the break. So Leah's very proactively pulled forward the break a little bit to 9:45. So there will be coffee and refreshments upstairs at 9:45 for anyone who wants it. And you know, great, thank you very much, Leah, and thanks once again for the hotel staff for flexing around us. So I think we'll formally close the meeting here and break until 10 o'clock. But the final thank you, I think, is back to our colleagues at OCC. You know, they have provided fantastic support and really borne with us, because we've rolled this meeting over from 2020 to 2021 to 2022. And of course, they're hosting us for the Public Sector Standard Assessors Forum next week. So if we can just finish with a final round of appreciation to show our appreciation for OCC. Okay, so we finished there, and if members can come back here for our in-camera session at 10 o'clock to discuss the strategy on sustainability reporting. And just to say that as he was there at our discussions in March, I've asked Thomas as CAG chair if he will also join us for that, if that's okay. Thank you very much, everyone. See you back, members back at 10 o'clock.